Hello and welcome to Crime Through Time, snapshots of crime history. In 1944, Arthur Hayes, a leading aircraftsman in the RAF, was remanded in prison awaiting trial for the murder and intimate violation of Winifred Mary Evans. The case was largely circumstantial, but it would be Arthur himself who would seal his fate when he attempted to point the finger of suspicion elsewhere. On the 9th of November 1944, Winifred or Winnie Evans attended a dance at the US Aerodrome in Norfolk. She was born in 1917 in Williston, Middlesex, the first child of William Henry Evans and Eliza Winifred (née Shivers). Now 27, she was a radio operator in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, or WAF, stationed at Elo RAF Station in Suffolk. Around midnight, Winnie and her friend, WAF Corporal Margaret Johns, returned to the base. They parted ways, with Winnie going to her room for a quick change before heading out on duty. Margaret visited the bathroom block, where she discovered a man in an RAF uniform, drunk and claiming to be lost. Suspicious but not concerned, she directed him to Camp No. 1, the RAF men's camp, and went to bed. In the morning hours of the 9th of November, Winnie's body was discovered face down in the mud at the bottom of a ditch near Elo Road Junction by Wilfred Payne, a local man. The local police in Beccles called in Scotland Yard. Chief Detective Inspector Green, with Dr. Keith Simpson, the Home Office pathologist, attended the scene. Winnie was found with a black tie and a sailor's knot around her neck, and it was clear that she had been subjected to a horrendous level of violence, including strangulation, suffocation, and what they termed outrage, what we now call rape. Margaret came forward reporting the RAF officer that she had seen that night, and as a result, a team of Scotland Yard detectives headed to Camp No. 1 to interview the men. Now you may be wondering why the civilian police were investigating rather than the military police, as the victim and the suspect are both enlisted. Under UK law, they have automatic jurisdiction over all cases of murder, manslaughter and treason. It is deemed in the public interest that they are independently examined. It soon became clear that leading aircraftman Arthur Hayes was a person of interest. His bunkmates reported that he hadn't returned until somewhere between 1 and 1:30 a.m. He hadn't put on the light and went to bed in silence. In the morning, it was noted his civilian shoes and uniform were exceptionally dirty. He spent a lot of time cleaning his shoes and brushing his trousers. One man reported seeing scratches on his hands. Arthur Hayes was born on the 1st of November 1907 in Colne, Lancashire. He was the youngest of 4 sons born to Edward Hayes and Mary (née Laycock). His father was a cotton weaver by trade. An identification parade was arranged. Despite Arthur being lined up in the R's rather than the H's, Margaret didn't hesitate in picking him out as the man she had given directions to. Arthur's account of the night was that he had gone into Beccles drinking, having 3 pints of Coke mild and bitter in one pub before moving to another and having a further 5 pints. He then attended a dance, but he had managed to lose his bicycle, so had walked back. He would admit to being the lost man, but claimed he followed Margaret's directions, walking straight back to the billet, and he, quote, never passed or saw a soul. He didn't put on the light as he did not want to disturb anyone. However, his bunkmates were mistaken. He had gotten home around 12:30 a.m. Hair samples were collected from the crime scene, and they matched hairs found on Arthur's coat. However, Arthur had only been at the camp for 4 days, following a 10-day leave visiting his wife and children in Colne. At this time, hair comparison was done manually under the microscope, and the hairs were also found to be a possible match for Arthur's wife. When the police looked into Arthur's home life, he was described as a Jekyll and Hyde character. When sober, he was a loving and attentive husband and father. When drunk, he was known to be violent. Arthur was charged with Winnie's murder, and his trial began on the 22nd of January 1945 in Suffolk Assizes, Bury St Edmunds, before Mr Justice McNaughton, and lasted 3 days. Mr John Flowers, KC, appeared for the prosecution. Mr F.T. Alp and Mr M.T. Solomon defended Arthur. His wife sat in the gallery for every moment of the trial. Dr. Eric Biddle, pathologist at the East Suffolk and Ipswich Hospital, testified that Winnie had been attacked and either thrown or fell into the ditch and then jumped on, intimately assaulted, and the cause of death was asphyxia caused by compression of the chest. Further analysis had been done on Arthur's coat, which found bloodstains that matched Winnie's blood group. But Arthur had a plausible explanation. Back in October, he had stopped and given first aid to a cyclist who had fell and cut his hand. Samples were taken from the ditch, and there was a dry, gritty material which matched both Winifred's shoes and Arthur's shoes. Up until this point, nothing definitive had been presented. There was plenty of room for reasonable doubt. But it transpired that Arthur had made a very stupid decision whilst on remand in Norwich Prison. He wrote an anonymous letter to the commanding officer of Camp 1. It proclaimed to be from the actual killer. Arthur was innocent. They had, in fact, assaulted and murdered Winifred. Yet, included in the letter were details that only the murderer would know. The letter was written in blue crayon, in block letters, and bore a Norwich postmark. Quote, "Will you please give this letter to the solicitors for the airman who is wrongfully accused of murdering Winnie Evans? I want to state that I am the person responsible for the above-mentioned girl's death. I had arranged to meet her at the bottom of the road where the body was found at midnight. When I arrived, she was not there. I waited some time and decided to walk towards the WAF quarters. Just before I reached this, I heard a voice and stood close to the hedge. I heard footsteps. It proved to be an airman. I don't think he saw me. I then saw someone I recognised as Winnie. She said I should not have come down to meet her at the WAF. Her friend had offered to go along with her as the airman ahead was drunk and had lost his way. She had her cycle with her, but no one will find this. She told me she could not stay long. I must have been mad. I don't know what happened. I know she struggled. I shall be going overseas shortly. Please convey my humble apologies to the airmen concerned." Superintendent Shirrell, an experienced officer in the comparison and identification of handwriting department of Scotland Yard, testified. He examined the anonymous letter and the block letters Arthur had used to fill out his application for leave. His testimony was that they were a match, and Arthur had written the letter. Mr. Alp challenged Shirrell on cross-examination. He asked how he accounted for differences in many letters. He answered, quote, that it might be the speed or the desire to write not in a natural style. The letters are only superficially different, but basically not. On the stand, Arthur stated he was both innocent of the crime and of writing the letter. He had been in prison since the 5th of December and had been escorted when he went to court dates, so could not have posted the letter. Flowers pressed him on the passage detailing the drunk airman at the WAF billets. Quote, "Nobody in the world could have put that in this letter according to any reasonable view of the evidence, except this man." Plus, realistically, would a rapist and killer, who was so close to getting away with a murder because another man was accused of their crime, write such a letter? If they were so morally bankrupt to have committed such a violent act, I doubt their conscience would be a problem seeing Arthur hanged for it. The judge did not pull his punches when he summed up for the jury. Winnie, quote, had been treated with such savagery and violence that she was not able to breathe. A murder more savage and horrible than any in my experience of crime. It would take the jury just 40 minutes to return a guilty verdict. As with the law, Arthur was asked why the sentence of death should not be passed. He replied, quote, "God knows I am innocent of this foul crime. I know God will look after me. I am not afraid." He then looked at his wife in the gallery, who was quietly crying, as Chief Justice McNaughton passed the sentence of death by hanging. As with all death penalty cases, an appeal was heard. It was held on the 26th of February 1945 before Justices Crome Johnson, McNaughton, a different judge from the trial judge, and Wriothesley. It was dismissed, and on the 2nd of March it was officially announced that there was no reprieve and the execution was given the go-ahead. At 9 a.m. on Tuesday the 13th of March 1945, Arthur was hanged at Norwich Prison by Thomas Pierrepoint with the assistance of Steve Wade. His death was instantaneous. Tragically, Edward Hayes, Arthur's father, would also die by hanging, only this was by his own hand. He had been under medical supervision for the previous 12 months for depression. Arthur would only have been 5 years old. Both men were 38 years old when they died. Arthur's widow would go on to marry twice more and pass away in 1990, aged 79. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and let me know what you think of this case in the comments below, and I look forward to welcoming you in the next one.